Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2018 Thrilling 32.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first round of the 2018 Thrilling 32. I am Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York, alongside, as always, Andy Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois. Andy, tonight we start to reveal who is moving on to the next round in the 2018 Thrilling 32, and we start to get a better idea of maybe what coaster you folks may have voted as your favorite wood and favorite steel roller coaster as part of the 2017 Ride Warrior Choice Awards. We've got 32 wood, 32 steel roller coasters in a random bracket like we showed you on the selection show a few weeks ago. The last couple weeks you spent hours and hours going through the previous winners.
Or some of us minutes and minutes.
Or seconds and seconds as some of these submissions reveal to us that some people maybe didn't spend as much time as maybe they wish they would have when they see some of these results. Andy, we saw 64 coasters in all come in, 32 wood, 32 steel. We had a lot of the perennial favorites, as we like to say here, but we saw a lot of dark horses, a lot of rides making an entry into the bracket for the very first time this year, which is going to make it somewhat challenging because, we had almost 400 voters in the Ride Warrior Choice Awards this year, a new record, and we also had a new record of bracket submissions. We had over 100 brackets submitted this year, which is by far a record. So first and foremost, thank you, everyone, for partaking in this contest. And over the course of the next several weeks, you're going to find out not only who the number one wood and number one steel roller coasters are from the Ride Warrior Choice Awards, but we're going to find out who is our bracketologist and our champion this year with the opportunity to sit amongst greatness. And, I was talking to one Drew the intern from In the Loop last week, and, he was as he was filling out his bracket, he was talking to me. He said, this is really interesting. I like the way you guys do this because you give us the opportunity to vote and to let our voices be heard and say, this is what I like and this is what I prefer. And then when you get to the bracket contest, you have to throw all of that out the window because you now have to try and put aside your own preferences and your own feelings, and you have to try and figure out what the collective has decided that they prefer. And that's what over the course of the next few weeks we're going to reveal here in the form of the Thrilling 32. So this is the first round. We're going to narrow the field from 32 to 16 in each of the two brackets. And then next week we'll narrow it to 8, so on and so forth, until we get our champions at the beginning of March. So Andy, any thoughts before we start?
This is always my favorite round because inevitably, there are some heartbreaks here. There's always shockers of people moving on into the second round that you didn't quite expect. And like you said, this year was exceptionally difficult because you don't know where to place the new coasters, and you don't know where to place all these newcomers to the Thrilling 32. So it's going to be really exciting to see because I think we're going to get, after this first round, a pretty good idea of which coasters are the real deal and which coasters are the posers.
That's right, and inevitably, there's always a few Cinderellas that make it through the first round here. So we will see if history shall repeat itself again. So why don't we jump right into it? We'll start with the wood bracket as always, and we'll start in the Harry Traver region with Boulder Dash versus Thunderhead. And this is one that we broke down during the selection show because these are two rides that historically have both done pretty well here, and one that, as you can see, Andy, you're rolling your eyes and falling asleep. Oh, Andy, time to wake up.
Oh, sorry, I took some Benadryl before the show.
Yes, right.
But that matchup right there would put any man to sleep, regardless of drug. Um,
Well,
holy hell, man!
yeah, and you pulled out your double disqualification, double count out. Neither coaster moves on, but it is Boulder Dash.
Much like this past Super Bowl, many people were hoping that both the Eagles and the Patriots would both lose the game. So,
well, I think we were hoping for a tie because I don't know if playoff games can end in ties, but most players don't know that regular season games can end in ties. So
I don't even watch football. So I don't know what I'm talking about here.
Well, yes. Yeah, so it is Boulder Dash moving on from Lake Compounds, defeating Thunderhead. I don't think that's a huge surprise given the history here that we broke down in the selection show. And if you go back to RideWarriorChoiceAwards.weebly.com, you'd clearly see that Boulder Dash has been the favorite between these two in the previous years. So Boulder Dash moving on to the next round. So now we're going to get a chance to see who Boulder Dash will be taking on. It's the winner of Gold Striker versus Goliath. So two coasters coming out of the two different Great America parks. Gold Striker from California's Great America and Goliath from your home park, Six Flags Great America. And, you have not been on Gold Striker yet. Maybe this year you're thinking about getting up there, but Gold Striker has always been a top 5 wood coaster for me. I enjoy it very much. And, so I know you're not a Thunderhead fan. Does Gold Striker look like a ride that you would enjoy?
Yeah. I don't think it. It doesn't look like a ride that it reminds me of almost like a bigger Renegade, and I really enjoyed Renegade.
Okay.
And I think Gold Striker might strike some gold when I ride it. Yeah.
So do you prefer Goliath or Renegade?
Currently I have Goliath ranked higher than Renegade. I do. Okay. Just by a few spots though. I think Goliath is my number 10 wood coaster, and I think Renegade's at like 11 or 12. So they're as close can be there.
All right. Well, it is Gold Striker. Moving on to the Sweet 16, Gold Striker will take on Boulder Dash. And I'll tell you what, Gold Striker has always been a top 10 coaster in this poll.
Yeah.
But has historically had some pretty tough matchups. Goliath definitely won in the first round, maybe even a tougher matchup against Boulder Dash coming up in the second round. So we'll see how that pans out. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got Ravine Flyer 2 going up against the coaster from Peony Playland. And these are two coasters we've talked about a lot over the years. Ravine Flyer because it always seems to make a pretty deep run. And the coaster is one that neither you nor I have ridden, but it seems to be one that always seems to just pop up here and, seems to win a game or two. Any chance the coaster can pull off the upset here?
Ravine Flyer is never a coaster it's always in the mix of things. It's always a spoiler, but it's never a champion. But at the same time, coaster at P&E has never really made a big splash in the Thrilling 32 here. I just don't see any way that Ravine Flyer doesn't move on here.
Well, it is Ravine Flyer 2 moving on to the Sweet 16 here in the Traver region. So the coaster at P&E Playland will have to wait another year to maybe make another deep run. The final matchup in the Traver region now is going to be Voyage from Holiday World, last year's number 3 coaster, a former champion, going up against Colossus from Hyde Park in Germany, Heide Park. For the locals there. And Colossus, we talked about this last time. Very interesting that it was standing but not operating in 2017, and we learned that it will undergo major refurbishment in 2018 with the intention of reopening in 29, just in time for yours truly to make a trip over to Germany and hopefully ride Colossus in a couple years. A lot of people consider that the European version of El Toro. It's the Intamin plug-and-play. In the years that it has qualified in this poll, it has done rather well and found its way into the top 10. But is it enough to take down Voyage, even though Voyage trending down a little bit?
No.
No. Okay. Andy is correct. It is Voyage. Moving on to the Sweet 16. Very well put there. And you look at the 4 coasters moving on here. This could potentially be a Final Four. Boulder Dash, Gold Striker, Ravine Flyer, and Voyage. I mean, Ravine Flyer, you always call Ravine Flyer the poor man's Voyage.
Danny, this is a Final Four only in Danny Miller's book.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, this is a Danny Miller Final Four right here.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, this is the Danny Miller special, I think, in this region.
Yeah, but definitely 4 coasters that have always done very well. I mean, all 4 of these coasters have been in the top 10 repeatedly in the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. So Boulder Dash versus Gold Striker and Ravine Flyer 2 going up against Voyage in the Sweet 16. So we will see how those matchups pan out next week. Moving on to the actual Danny Miller, or the John Miller region, as it were. We're going to talk about Tremors from Silverwood Theme Park in Idaho going up against Troy from Toverland in the Netherlands. And this is one, neither of us have ridden either of these coasters. These are 2 coasters that are very seldom ridden because Tremors out there on the West Coast, up there in Idaho, even a lot of the California folks haven't made their way up there. Troy over in the Netherlands, a lot of American voters have not ridden it. So very tough to gauge where this one is going. Any inkling on your part?
I have no idea. I don't know. I would probably say Tremors just because it's American coaster and might have received a few more votes there. I really don't know on this one though.
Well, this one might be the first mild upset. It is Troy from Toverland moving on to the Sweet 16. So Tremors has always done pretty well in this poll, but Troy in its first year gaining enough riders and voters to qualify for the bracket. Troy moving on to the Sweet 16. So congratulations to Troy there. Another ride that hopefully in 2019 I will get to ride on our European trip. All right, the next one is a big one here. And I say this because this is a matchup where we have multiple people who submitted brackets having each of these coasters as their eventual champions.
Yeah.
Wildfire, from Kolmarden Wildlife Park in Sweden, going up against Mystic Timbers, the favorite new ride of 2017 in the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. From Kings Island, the GCI there at Kings Island. Multiple people picking Mystic Timbers to win it all this year, and multiple people selecting Wildfire to win it all this year when they submitted their brackets. So, Andy, right off the bat, we're going to have people having a wood champion knocked out here.
Well, even if you don't have this one picked as your champion, you probably have it picked going pretty deep here. It's very likely to go to the Elite 8, either one of these 2 coasters, because we just talked about Troy not having a huge ridership out there. Wildfire, the same thing, but people rave about Wildfire when you talk to them about it. So I would think either of these 2 coasters have a pretty good chance of moving to the Elite 8. If not to the Final Four, you might have written them down based on what's on the other half of this bracket. And like you said, to become an eventual, possible champion here. So this is a pretty big matchup right off the bat. Oh, man. Danny, I'll say this.
What do you think?
I watched some videos of Wildfire, and color me not impressed, okay? I know it's long.
Really?
I know it does the typical RMC stuff, but I think it also does the typical RMC dies at the end of the ride stuff. And you know how much I hate that. I think as more people get out there to Kolmarden to ride it, yes, is it going to be a top 10 coaster, top 15 coaster? Probably. Wood coasters suck in general, so, it'll probably be, better than that. But Mystic Timbers, I'll tell you what, most of the people that ride Mystic Timbers really love Mystic Timbers, and a lot of people have ridden Mystic Timbers. I don't want to say that we have a full Fury effect going on here, but I think Mystic Timbers is going to go pretty deep in this.
Now, what is the potential that you remember a few years ago we saw Boulder Dash and El Toro, both top 5 coasters, meeting in the very first round. We don't know what the rankings are. We know at the end of this we're going to know who ranked higher, but what are the odds that we're seeing 2 rides here that are, really high in the rankings, and it just so happened, whichever one's a little bit higher is moving on? Is that a possibility here?
It's a possibility. Anything can happen here, but do I believe that? When you say top ride, what are you speaking? Top 5, top 4?
Well, we've seen it before where we found out after the fact that we saw 2 top 10 rides going at it in the first round, and we found that after the fact. Do you think it's possible that both of these will be in the top 10 come March when the full rankings come out?
I think it's very possible they are both in the top 10. I
Okay.
think it's very unlikely that they are both in the top 4 or 5.
Okay.
I think that's unlikely. I think top 10, I think you're a safer bet. And even then, who knows? Even then, because Mystic Timbers does have detractors. There are people who say that Mystic Timbers isn't even the best wood coaster in the park. Those people can once again lose my face.
Well, hold on. We're gonna get to those folks in a minute. Don't beat me to the don't beat me to the punchline here. All right. So, moving on to the Sweet 16 is Mystic Timbers from Kings Island. Moving on, and there were a lot of folks, not a lot of folks, but enough folks that I can hear a few groans as we announced that Mystic Timbers moving on to the Sweet 16, who selected Wildfire to win it all. Wildfire knocked out again. Doesn't mean it didn't do very, very well in the poll. It just means Mystic Timbers ranked higher than Wildfire in this year's Ride Warrior Choice Awards. Mystic Timbers moving on to the Sweet 16.
And let me say once again, color me unimpressed by Wildfire.
Okay.
I like I said, I've watched those POVs, and granted, you have to ride stuff, but something seems amiss there. It's just way too long to maintain a speed, and anyone who's voting for Wildfire all the way to champion, I think, is misguided at best.
I will say, again, we can't say for sure until we've ridden it, but it does seem like Mystic Timbers does maintain its speed a little bit better. And
I can assure you, Mystic Timbers.
And given Mystic Timbers is a little bit of a shorter ride as well, and it does stay lower to the ground, but still, I mean, Mystic Timbers is very relentless. Top 10 wood coaster for me as well.
Top 5 in my book.
Yeah, it's borderline top 5. I think it's number 6 on mine. So very so that right there, I think, is proof that Mystic Timbers is going to do very well when the final rankings come out. We'll see if it gets by Troy in the Sweet 16, a GCI on GCI matchup there coming up in the Sweet 16.
I think you can take that one to the bank, Danny Miller.
All right, well, let's move on to, speaking of GCI versus GCI, we've got kind of a GCI retrofit in Ghost Rider, Knott's Berry Farm, going up against Prowler from Worlds of Fun. And these are two that you love, Andy. What are your thoughts here? I know your heart lies with Prowler. What are you thinking here?
I'll tell you what. If ever there was a ride, a matchup here, if that whole
now that's a ride.
Now these are 2 rides here. I'm telling you. Someone start a podcast call and call it that. So we got Ghost Rider and Prowler. So Ghost Rider, I loved Ghost Rider before the retrofit. I thought it was a fantastic wood coaster. Mm-hmm. After the retrofit, I rode it this past October. That thing was just flying off that track. Now, I warn you, do not sit in the front row. It's not really a front row ride. Sit in the back, and the amount of air you get in that back row is just outstanding. Prowler, on the other hand, has been solid. Some people have criticized Prowler over the last season or so, saying that it could use a little retracking here and there. That it's gotten a little rough. And we rode it this past summer, and it was okay. My first ride on Prowler, I was not super enthused by. I think it's a great night ride, and unfortunately, like we did not get those night rides this summer due to unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, that was that was a wild sequence there.
Oh, holy hell! But still,
when the temperature drops 40 degrees in 15 minutes, folks, that's how tornadoes happen. Let's
15. It dropped 40 degrees in about 30 seconds. The wind blew through and it started freezing everything. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But Prowler, I rank my rides based on best ride I've ever had. So Prowler still top in my book, but this one's a really tough one because I know a lot of people have ridden Ghost Rider and really love Ghost Rider now with the new GCI train. So this is a real tough one to predict. I have them like back to back too. Like,
Yeah.
like I can.
I have them very close on my rankings as well. Now, I haven't ridden the new version of Ghost Rider. I'm used to the CCI Ghost Rider. Hopefully this year I'll get to try out the new version, but I do have them very similarly placed, a little bit lower on mine than you do on yours. But moving on to the Sweet 16 is Prowler from Worlds of Fun. How about that? And a sigh of relief maybe from some of the Prowler fans, because we know we have a lot of them here that view the show. So Prowler, moving on to the Sweet 16. How about this, Andy? The GCI is going essentially 3 for 3 here in this region.
I like it. Well, it had to happen there, didn't it? Like, some of them.
Well, yeah. That last one for sure. Now the final matchup in the Miller region here, we've got the Beast from Kings Island going up against Rampage from Alabama Splash Adventure. Andy?
Are you serious? Like, come on. This matchup means nothing to me whatsoever. Anyone who picked the Beast to go past Rampage, like, people, come on. Like Rampage, what wasn't it ranked in like the top 10, top 5 maybe?
Yeah, it's number 5 last year.
Like, come on. The Beast hasn't ever broken anything. Beast is lucky to even be in the top 32 according to me. So there's no question here.
Well, it is Rampage. Moving on to
shocker, folks! Shocker here.
And you know what, Andy? I have to say this as someone who sees the bracket submissions as they come in. I have to say I am utterly shocked at the number of people who knew where Beast ranked last year and where Rampage ranked last year, number 5, and still insist on selecting the Beast. Look, I love the Beast. I know you don't, but let me say this. I love the Beast. I love Rampage. I love both of these rides. But again, this is about putting your own personal thoughts aside and trying to predict what the collective voting pool came up with. And history shows you, if you look at the previous year's rankings, that people rank the Beast lower than they do Rampage. That's been the case for several years. So a lot of people clearly have not looked back at the history of this poll and seen that Rampage historically has ranked not just a little higher, but quite a bit higher than the Beast. So I'm still, again, personal thoughts aside here for a second, I'm shocked at how many people insist on selecting the Beast in these types of matchups.
It shouldn't be that hard, especially for these. Like there's a lot of hard matchups in picking these 32 rides. But this one should have been an easy one. Come on.
Yeah. It definitely should have been easier than some of the other ones in the region here. So that one arguably should have been the easiest pick in that region, I think. I think the other 3 should have all been harder. But why don't we move on here to the Thompson region? We're halfway through the first round of the Thrilling 32 Bracket Challenge here on the wood side of things. We're going with the Boardwalk Bullet against the Wild Mouse from Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Again, a lot of people cheering tears of joy seeing the Wild Mouse getting into the Thrilling 32 just weeks after being demolished at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but going up against a first-timer to the Thrilling 32 in the Boardwalk Bullet from Kima Boardwalk down there outside of Houston, Texas. Now, again, I stood 5 feet from the Wild Mouse, never got to ride it, have not ridden the Boardwalk Bullet, hopefully going to do that this year. I really don't know where to go on this one because the Wild Mouse a couple years back actually won 2 matchups, I believe, in kind of a Cinderella story. Does the Wild Mouse have a little bit of magic left in it?
I have no idea here. This was one of the tougher matchups, I think, in this round, definitely. And I have no idea where this one's going to go. I don't know.
Well, we talked about how sort of a storybook ending to have the Wild Mouse get into the Thrilling 32, but it will not move on. It is Boardwalk Bullet advancing to the Sweet 16 here. So, alas, the Wild Mouse gets into the Thrilling 32, but does not win a matchup this year. So that will kind of close the book on the Wild Mouse at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And I will say this, and I like to do this. when we get to some of these. I can tell you that Wild Mouse was number 32 in the overall ranking. So regardless of who Wild Mouse would have gone up against, it would not have advanced. So the Wild Mouse coming in right at number thrilling 32, just enough to get in, not enough to move on. So Boardwalk Bullet moving on to the Sweet 16. Now, Boardwalk Bullet, one of those, kind of consulted on by the Gravity Group, built by Martin and Vlemings, I believe. We've got two other Gravity Group-esque coasters here because we've got the Legend from Holiday World, which was built by CCI, which was the first incarnation of the Gravity Group, and then one of the Gravity Group's newest creations in Kukulin. We've been all over the board as to how to correctly pronounce that, but Wikipedia will tell you it's something like Cuchulainn, I think, over there at Tato Park in Ireland. This is one that you've kind of, again, sort of with Wildfire, you've looked at POVs of this ride, and, some spots impress you, some spots don't. But again, we talked about it in the matchup where Legend maybe not ranking quite as highly as you and I think it should over the years.
The problem with, and I'll keep calling it Choo-Choo Lane just to irritate people.
Of course you will.
So, the problem with that one is, once again, a really big ride, just like Wildfire. Real big, real long, lots of stuff going on. But once again, I think there's spots on it that just looked really slow to me. And I looked at a number of different POVs, some off-ride POVs, and nothing in that ride seems. Yes, is it a pretty good ride? Probably. Is it a top 5 ride? I don't know. Is it better than Legend? I don't know. So this is another tough decision. It has the length. It has the standing that people want in a big wood coaster. But doesn't have the pedigree of Legend, a perennial favorite. Maybe not as high, in the poll, but still one that people generally like. I don't know if it has what it takes to overcome here. But however, I would not be surprised if it moves on.
Well, it is the Legend moving on to the Sweet 16 here, and maybe. I don't know if that's a bit of a surprise or not to people. Looking at the brackets, this was one that people were very, very split on. We had a lot of people, going with Legend, and we had a lot of people going with Cuchulainn because they didn't know where it was going to rank. And I think maybe the fact that Legend has always kind of been in the 20s or so, maybe swayed them to take a chance. It's interesting though there because not knowing where Boardwalk Bullet is. That half of this region is very interesting all of a sudden because you've got Legend, which historically is kind of in the, teens to 20s range. So, are you looking at Boardwalk Bullet here, making it to the Elite 8 maybe? Or are we going to have did Legend, jump up really high in the standings? We don't know. We'll find out in the coming weeks, but I think that becomes a very intriguing half of the bracket. And we said that during the selection show that, that half of the bracket really didn't have one that jumped out as, that's your Elite 8 coaster right there. Moving on here to the next matchup, we've got Shivering Timbers going up against Balder from Liseberg in Sweden, the Intamin plug-and-play twister-style coaster there. Again, we've got sort of a compact twister-style ride in Balder going up against. If there ever was, if you look up in the roller coaster dictionary, out and back, there's a picture of Shivering Timbers there because that literally describes perfectly what an out and back is. I love Shivering Timbers. I would love to ride Balder someday. Balder is one of those rides that has qualified and then not qualified here because of the number of riders. It's very hard to get to. But, Balder and Wildfire, both from Sweden. So what are the odds that maybe Balder moves on here instead of Wildfire as the Swedish wood coaster?
I don't know, because, Shivering Timbers is also one of those American rides that you tend to a lot of people tend to skip over Michigan's Adventure just because it's a small park. It's a little bit out of the way to get to, not a whole lot else going on up there in Michigan. For park-wise. But one that people tend to really like when they get up there. So Shivering Timbers always seems to move on, and and that could just be a false impression I have. So I would have to give it to Shivering Timbers here.
Well, I think you could maybe consider this one another mild upset. It is Balder from Liseberg moving on. So how about that? So Wildfire gets eliminated by Mystic Timbers, but Balder defeats Shivering Timbers.
Yeah,
so Swedish Coaster knocks down some Timbers, I guess, here. Balder moving on to the Sweet 16. I don't think that really matters, though, because the last matchup here, we've got Lightning Rod from Dollywood.
The last 15 minutes has been a complete waste of time because none of this matters. None of it matters.
The defending champion, Lightning Rod from Dollywood, going up against Raven from Holiday World. And, it really is a shame here because I love Raven. Raven is a ride that I've always really, really enjoyed, especially during Hollywood nights. Some of the night rides that I've had on Raven are absolutely out of this world. I got a unplanned Zen ride on Raven at the most recent Hollywood nights, where I just happened to be at Raven when it was very, very light crowd-wise, and I got to ride by myself in the back row. And boy, that fifth drop on Raven is one of the best in the world in terms of wood coaster drops. But no surprise here. Raven doesn't have the legs to take down the defending champion. Lightning Rod is moving on to the Sweet 16 and continues its quest to become the first repeat champion here. Lightning Rod will go up against Balder in the Sweet 16.
Like I said before, I think Lightning Rod has a cakewalk here to the Final Four. So that's no surprise at all.
Yeah, you said during the selection show that you thought that might have been the easiest pick for a Final Four coaster in the history of this tournament.
Yeah.
And I might agree with you just looking at that. We talked about how maybe Kukulin was the only one that maybe give you a little bit of pause because it was new to the bracket, but that's been knocked out already. So, definitely I think makes you feel pretty good about Lightning Rod if you've got Lightning Rod going to the Final Four, which I think is just about everybody, to be completely honest with you. I think just about everybody has that one. All right, let's move on to the Schmeck region, the final region, and we get back to, where a lot of these other, that very first region, we had a lot of coasters repeatedly in the top 10 in that region. We see a lot more of them here with Outlaw Run, El Toro, Phoenix, and we've got a couple of newcomers in here as well. T Express here for the first time. But first, we've got Vodon Timber Coaster from Europa Park going up against Outlaw Run from Silver Dollar City. And, we saw Outlaw Run drop off a little bit last year. And, I wonder, it's always, it was the defending champion and then dropped to number 8 last year. Was number 1 in its opening year, then number 2, then number 1 again, and now number 8 last year. Has Outlaw Run opened the door to maybe make an early exit? We saw Outlaw Run and El Toro last year, and we have the prospect of seeing that in the second round, but I wonder, is Outlaw Run's drop going to continue this year and maybe open the door for a ride like Vodon to maybe get a shot?
I don't know. I don't see it happening. I think Outlaw still has enough legs on it to make somewhat of a run here. I think it's going to run into a very formidable force in the next round here, but I do think it has enough to get past Wodon.
Well, it is Outlaw Run moving on to the Sweet 16 here. So Outlaw Run safe for now, and now we'll move on to the next matchup to see if we get that rematch from last year. We've got Renegade from Valley Fair in Shakopee, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis, going up against El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. And we previewed this one last time when we talked about how there was the Big Ace event out at Valley Fair this year and how many people have commented on videos this year talking about how much they love Renegade. And, I personally agree. I personally prefer Renegade to El Toro. I think Renegade does a lot more the type of stuff that I like to see in my wood coasters. But, Renegade came up earlier in this show here. We were talking about Renegade. And as much as it pains me to say, I don't think Renegade has enough to beat El Toro. I think El Toro has too many fans, and it's done too well in previous years of this poll to pull off the upset, although I would love to see it.
Yeah, come on. I like Renegade. I like El Toro better. I don't rank El Toro as low as you do. I don't think Renegade has a chance in hell here.
Well, it is El Toro moving on to the Sweet 16, and now, next week, we get that rematch between El Toro and Outlaw Run. El Toro took down the defending champion Outlaw Run last year, and it really messed with a lot of people's brackets. A lot of people were burning brackets early on, and, again, another tough decision. A lot of people having both El Toro and Outlaw Run moving on in the first round, so a lot of people forcing themselves to decide this matchup. So we'll see next week how that one pans out. All right, moving on to the last two matchups here. We've got T-Express from Everland in South Korea going up against the Phoenix from Knoebels Amusement Resort in Elysburg, Pennsylvania. And Andy, I posed a question to you during the selection show. You said, is Phoenix in trouble?
Well, I've had some time to think about that, and I know what I've said earlier about Wildfire and some of these other overseas coasters, but T-Express, man, this is that special case where we've seen T-Express do really well in other major polls. That when you get a certain amount of people who vote in polls, specifically the Hawker poll here, T-Express has done well. The question is, are those same people voting in this poll, and does it calculate the same way? Does that eventually turn into the same type of winner here? And I personally think Phoenix is in real big trouble here. I could totally see T-Express moving on here, and maybe making maybe actually winning another round, because I'm not too impressed by the matchup coming after this.
Well, that's a very solid point. And, so many people compare El Toro and T-Express because they're both the Intamin plug-and-plays. Wouldn't it be something to see that matchup in the Elite Eight with a spot in the Final Four on the line? But moving on to the Sweet 16, it is Phoenix from Knoebels Amusement Resort. So Phoenix, staying the course. Phoenix has always been kind of that ride that is always right there and just can't quite get to the pinnacle, but it is good enough to beat T-Express this year, and that makes me happy because I'm a big Phoenix fan. So we'll see just how deep Phoenix can go. All right, the last matchup here in the Schmeck region and the final matchup of the first round in the wood side of the Thrilling 32 2018, Hades 360 from Mount Olympus in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, going up against American Thunder from Six Flags St. Louis, outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And, we talked about it before. American Thunder seems to be all that ride that very quietly is always in the Thrilling 32, never makes a particularly deep run, but it always seems to be, it just always seems to be like it's there. It's always there.
Yeah, it is. Personally, I don't care. I actually liked the original Hades. I thought it was a fine roller coaster. So I would actually enjoy to see Hades move on here, but I don't know how this one's going to go, this Midwest matchup.
Well, it is Hades 360 moving on to the Sweet 16. So how about that? Hades 360 is a ride that gets a lot of hate. It is a rather rough ride. I've ridden the Hades 360 version of it. They've done some track work to try and smooth it out, but still a very aggressive ride. Certainly not for everybody. But it's the type of wood coaster that I enjoy, so I'm happy to see Hades 360 move on here, and we'll take on Phoenix next week in the Sweet 16. Any final thoughts on the first round wood results? Any big surprise? I don't think there's any huge surprises. I mean, the Mystic Timbers Wildfire matchup was one that I think a lot of people had their eyes on, and I think some people are surprised, some people aren't. But I don't think there should be too many surprises here.
No, there's a lot of tough decisions here, but surprises, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything where you're going to look at the screen and be like, oh my God, a travesty of justice has occurred here.
Yeah, right.
We'll see those later on, probably.
Well, maybe. So, all right, let's move on to the steel bracket now, the varsity, as you like to call it. We'll go to the Wardley region. First, we've got Sky Rush from Hershey Park going up against Phantom's Revenge from Kennywood, just outside of Pittsburgh. The Battle of Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania versus Western Pennsylvania of sorts here. You know, and we talked about this one in particular because Sky Rush has bounced around so much. And, you know, for 1 year it's in the 30s, then it's in the 40s, then it's in the top 10, then it's down in the teens. And it's bounced around so much. There was a lot of uncertainty there. And last year they were right next to each other. This year it is Sky Rush moving on to the Sweet 16. And, you know, this is one that I think a lot of people are holding their breath on because there's a lot of folks, I'll tell you this, a lot of folks picking Sky Rush to go to the Final Four this year out of this region. You know, we talked about in the selection show how there really isn't that long-time favorite like a Superman or an Intimidator 305 or a Fury or a Leviathan. You didn't have any of those coasters in this region that, you know, kind of stick out in your head as, yeah, that's the Final Four coaster right there. And I think a lot of people picking Sky Rush as their Final Four pick here. So those folks relieved to see Sky Rush moving on.
Yeah, this is a really open field here, this Wardley region.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of folks who did not pick Sky Rush to go to their Final Four picked one of these next two coasters. A lot of Wicked Cyclone people and a lot of Terran people, you know, picking one of these two rides to go to their Final Four. Wicked Cyclone, the RMC from Six Flags New England, and Terran, the multi-launch Intamin coaster from Phantasialand in Germany. And you made a specific prediction about this one when we did the selection show, and that you thought not Sky Rush, as much of a Sky Rush fan as you are, you picked Terran to kind of be your dark horse for this year.
Absolutely. I picked Terran to go all the way to the Final Four, and I'm standing by that prediction here as well. I think it's, I tell you what, this, even though this region is kind of open, it's a stacked region. You've got some real contenders here. A lot of different options, a lot of different question marks with things like Helix and Smiler and Medusa and Terran and now Sky Rush, because we don't know if Sky Rush has jumped up all of a sudden. We saw Maverick do a big jump. Maybe Sky Rush did big jump as well. I don't know, but I'm still picking Terran here.
Well, maybe you consider an upset, maybe you don't, but it is Terran from Phantasialand moving on to the Sweet 16. So we saw Terran do well last year, number 38 last year. So we know it's at least number 31 now that it's 1-1 matchup. So Terran continuing the climb up the Steel Coaster rankings, it would seem, this year. So Terran will take on Sky Rush, two Intamin coasters in the Sweet 16. We'll go at it. All right, next we've got Smiler, the world record holder for the most inversions on a roller coaster from Alton Towers in England, going up against Helix from Liseberg in Sweden. And that, you know, multi-launch mock rides coaster looks fantastic. You know, kind of looks like a better version of Blue Fire if you're just, you know, looking at the cover. I think Helix looks like it might be the better ride than Blue Fire, which has historically done very well in this poll. But Smiler and Helix, both newcomers to the Thrilling 32 this year, never been in the bracket before. Smiler is one that you and I both thought had a very good chance to make it in to the bracket, and it did. Helix is one that, you know, we didn't really talk about a whole heck of a lot, but here it is. And what do you think?
Well, you know, I was just watching a documentary on Helix the other day, and one of the, you know, park officials basically said that the goal when they built Helix was to, one, build the best coaster in the world, and then two, to build it in a way that we really haven't seen done before. Now, you can argue whether or not that was actually accomplished. I don't know. You know, I haven't been on it. Just watching POVs, I don't know if it's the best coaster in the world. I don't think we're going to see it come in at number one here. But I do think that a lot of people like it. A lot of people like that style of ride, reminiscent of a little bit of a Maverick. However, I think Smiler is an acquired taste that we know that most enthusiasts, you know, tend to not like heavy inversions, multiple inversions.
Good point.
we see stuff with a lot of, like, if we didn't, a lot more inverts would be on this list. We haven't even seen an invert yet. And that's because enthusiasts tend to not like heavy G-forced inversions. And I think that's a lot of what Smiler is. Now, you've ridden it. I kind of get that sense that
it's a very intense ride. I mean, I rank it kind of in the same class as a Monster. I rank it a little bit higher, but it's completely different. Monster is very graceful and has a lot of good pacing to it and some hang time. Smiler is all intensity and in your face, and it is relentless in a good way. In a good way, but it's
also
very
in a way,
ride.
but also in a way that I think is going to turn off a lot of people too. So I would not be and Helix has that more grace to it. It feels like more of like, Maverick is a very intense ride, but those inversions are graceful.
Sure.
Maybe not.
I think the corkscrews are. You can make the argument that the corkscrews definitely are.
Yeah.
So moving on to the Sweet 16, it will be Helix from Liseberg. So maybe make some good points there. It is Helix. Moving on to the Sweet 16. Wrapping up the Wardley region here, we've got Nitro from Six Flags Great Adventure going up against Medusa Steel Coaster from Six Flags Mexico, the RMC Iron Horse down there at Six Flags Mexico, just outside of Mexico City. And, Medusa is one, we've been waiting for Medusa Steel Coaster to rear its head in the bracket, and it finally did this year because, we've heard so many great things about it from so many different people. We've heard some mixed reviews from it as well. Ace did a big trip back in April, going down to Mexico to go to Six Flags Mexico as Raptor Dog making an appearance here.
Raptor Dog.
Yes. And, some people saying they like Superman a little bit better than Medusa at that same park, but Superman not in the bracket. You're not a huge Nitro fan. I think Nitro is one of the weaker B&M hypercoasters, but I don't know how to gauge Medusa either. But it must be pretty good because it's Medusa Steel Coaster moving on to the Sweet 16. So how about this? We've got Skyrush, Terran, Helix, and Medusa Steel Coaster. So we've got 3 out of the 4 rides in the Sweet 16 from this region from outside the United States. Pretty cool.
I like it. It's exciting to see Medusa move on here. I've heard a lot of good things about it. Nitro I'm not a huge fan of, but you got a pretty hefty lineup here. Once again, still a pretty open field, but it'll be fun to see how this one plays out especially.
Yeah, for sure. So let's keep going here. We'll go to the Ron Toomer region. And again, we've got a lot of overseas rides in this region as well. We're guaranteed at least 2 coasters from outside the United States moving on here because our first matchup is the Battle of the Big Coaster Brethren from Canada. North of the border, we've got Behemoth and Leviathan, both from Canada's Wonderland going at it here. Leviathan historically has been a little bit higher. Behemoth has done very, very well over the years. We saw Leviathan trending down a little bit last year, and I personally put Behemoth just a touch higher. I really like Behemoth's airtime and its pacing. I think it's really good. Leviathan, I think Leviathan has some really, really good airtime, but Behemoth has so much of it, and me being an airtime guy is why I prefer Behemoth just a little bit. Your thoughts on who's moving on here?
I like Leviathan. I don't dislike Behemoth. I like the what it does. But in general, I think Leviathan is the stronger of the 2 rides. The 300 feet is hard to beat. That first drop.
Yeah. Oh, the first drop is one of the best in the world.
And then the Leviathan speed hill is one of the best elements anywhere in the world as well. The second half is...
If only you had Iron Rattler with Leviathan speed hill, as someone once put a few years ago.
Yeah,
that would be one of the best ideas ever. It is Leviathan moving on to the Sweet 16 here in the Ron Toomer region. And it will face the winner.
Can we skip this? I can't even tonight.
Do you really want to?
I can't even with this. Danny, if Storm Chaser wins this, I'm walking out. I'm done. I'm done.
Well, Andy, you can stay because Goliath from Six Flags Over Georgia knocks off Storm Chaser from Kentucky Kingdom. Goliath from Six Flags Over Georgia knocks off Storm Chaser Goliath, moving on to the Sweet 16 to take on Leviathan. That'll be a very interesting matchup because those two rides ranked very, very close to each other last year in the rankings. We're talking a lot about B&M hyper coasters and giga coasters and whatnot in this region. So why not talk about another one?
Why not?
We'll get Mako from SeaWorld Orlando going up against the defending champion Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park. I really like Mako. I've always had amazing rides on Mako. You seem to disagree with that. Neither of us have ridden Expedition G-Force. Hopefully that is one that I will get to ride in 2019. But for now, we're going to have to go on conjecture here. You don't seem to give Mako any chance to pull off the upset here.
I don't. Well, you're talking about defending champion here. And is Mako a number one coaster? Because... And even if it's not, even if Expedition G-Force isn't a number one coaster, is Mako a top 5, top 10 coaster?
Yeah, that's what you're really relying on here if you're picking Mako. You're not really relying on Mako to be number one. You're relying on Expedition G-Force to come back to the field, and I don't know that's going to happen here.
I don't think that's going to happen. And I think Expedition G-Force would just have to drop way too much for Mako to make a dent here. I think Mako is a good coaster. I don't dislike Mako. I think it does a lot of great stuff. I don't think it's an amazing coaster either. When I say amazing, I mean in my top 10. Mako's nowhere near that. So, Expedition G-Force, I don't know where it would be, but I got to believe that it's going to be better than Mako.
Well, the defending champion is often running. It does defeat Mako. Expedition G-Force moving on to the Sweet 16 this year, often running at a chance to once again become the first repeat Steel winner. We've never had a repeat winner. We've had Outlaw Run win twice, but we've never had the same ride win either of these in back-to-back years. So Expedition G-Force keeps those hopes alive. Moving on to the last matchup in the Tumor region, we've got Schwerdeskirchen from Hansa Park in northern Germany going up against Goliath from Walibi Holland. And again, two overseas rides that you and I do not know a whole lot about. Again, hopefully two rides that I will get to ride in 2 years when we head over to Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Those are two that are kind of on our radar right now. But for now, this is what you and I are spectators here. We really can't share a whole lot about this. You've got a Gerslauer Infinity Coaster going up against the smaller Intamin style hyper coaster that's not quite at the 200. People say that the Goliath at Walibi Holland is the Intamin hyper coaster that didn't eat all its Wheaties because it's not actually 200 feet high, but it's styled very much like the Superman.
You know what? You use that same joke with the Goliath at Laurent too. So
yes, that's exactly yes. Goliath at Laurent is the B&M hyper coaster that didn't eat all its Wheaties, and Goliath at Walibi Holland is like the Superman ride of steel that didn't quite eat all its Wheaties. And you know what, Andy? We're going to have to get used to saying Schwerdeskirchen for at least one more round because Schwerdeskirchen from Hansa Park is moving on to the Sweet 16. I don't even know if that's an upset or not. We'll have to defer to our European friends who have ridden these rides. So two German rides going at it in the Sweet 16. Andy, we talked about this in the previous region. We had 3 of the 4 rides in the Wardley region from outside the United States. Again, in the Tumor region, 3 of the 4 rides outside the United States. So 6 of the 8 coasters in the Sweet 16 on this half are from outside the United States. We've got Leviathan in Canada and Expedition G-Force and Schwerdeskirchen from Germany. And then we've got Helix from Sweden. We've got, Terran from Germany. And we've got Medusa Steel Coaster from Mexico. We've got coasters all over the map.
I got news for you, Danny. I'm a little worried that we're going to get a phone call from the White House here, and that this is going to be declared a fake poll because that's what's happening.
A fake poll.
Fake poll.
but what I noticed is that you're not really upset with any of these results, as it were. It sounds like you're pretty content with how things have shaken out so far.
Yeah, I think the rides that have moved on, for the most part, are pretty solid rides. I don't see anything that's like there's no Liseberg Boddens in here, so
let's not get started there.
So really the stuff that's in here, there's this Karnan ride. I don't quite know, what it's all about. I like Gerslauer Infinity coasters though. So maybe, is it a top 32 ride? I don't know. Does it matter? I don't think it does. I think Expedition G4 is going to win regardless.
All right, well, let's move on to the Stengel region here, and this is the region of death, if there ever was one, Andy. We've got all the good coasters in this region. We've got Iron Rattler, Nemesis, X2, Intimidator 305, Superman the Ride from Six Flags New England, Goliath from Laron, thanks for playing, and then Maverick and Millennium.
Holy hell.
Let's start with Iron Rattler and Nemesis. Nemesis, very, very good in this poll historically. And again, the same way we saw that the Coaster Crew trip that I was on affecting Smiler, pushing it in seemingly to the Thrilling 32. That same trip has the potential to affect Nemesis positively or negatively when you have so many new people riding a ride. If you have one or two people who maybe aren't huge fans of it, maybe it doesn't help it. But if you have a lot of people who really love it, maybe it really helps it. But again, Iron Rattler, always a top 10 ride in this poll. Boy, all of these matchups.
I'll tell you what.
So tough.
In a region of tough matchups, this is one of the, there's two really tough matchups here in my mind. This one and then the last one we'll talk about here. Because this one, I really like Iron Rattler. It's done well. Nemesis, I don't know. But you guys have ridden it. You said that you really liked it. We know Nemesis has done well. This is maybe one of the toughest matchups that you had to select in the entire bracket. Now, you could argue, too, that it might have ramifications as well. There's a chance that either of these two rides could go all the way to the Final Four here. So I
think any ride in this region, aside from Goliath, has the potential to go to the Elite Eight Final Four area. I mean,
yeah,
really.
Yeah. It really does. This was a really tough one. Oh, man. I might have to go with British Raptor here.
Much to my dismay, it is Iron Rattler.
Really?
On to the Sweet 16. So I wonder if maybe, some people riding Nemesis for the first time, and again, it doesn't mean they ranked it low, but historically we've seen as rides get more riders, they do tend to settle in, especially the rides that start very high. We saw Twisted Colossus drop a little bit. We saw Banshee start off very high and drop a little bit as more people ride it, because the more people ride rides, yes, you have a higher chance of moving it up or solidifying its high ranking, but you also have a better chance because of the way our algorithm works. It's not based on how many riders have ridden it. It's based on where those who have ridden it have ranked it. So when a ride like Nemesis gets ridden by a lot of new people, the chance of it moving up are the same as its chances of moving down in the rankings, because it's all dependent on where those people rank the ride. It doesn't matter how many people have ridden it. I think this might be an indication that more people riding the ride has actually hurt the ride, which is the contrary of what we're used to seeing in polls like the Golden Tickets, where more riders typically help a ride do better. We may be seeing the opposite here with Nemesis as Iron Rattler moves on.
Well, you get a more robust opinion that
Sure.
when you base an opinion on a small sample, of course that opinion is going to be real judgmental. That if all those people like it, it's going to be really high. If all those people, if they're in the middle, but when you get a more robust opinion and you put more into the pot, you get an opinion that's probably closer to reality and closer to a good average of everything. And I think Nemesis here suffers from it being a little old, suffers from it, being an invert. Some people don't like that. And I think as more people write it, there's always the new hotness out there.
Well, and Nemesis is a very, very intense ride, which is part of the reason I loved it. But like you said, some people don't like the wall.
And let's discount everything else. Everything we just said, let's put all that aside for a second. Europe, and especially England in the next few years, are going to be getting a whole lot of new rides. Really fantastic rides for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And I think this is also a matter of people who have, Nemesis in their rankings that they're putting the new rides over Nemesis as well. So not only are we getting a more robust opinion from more people, but I think what we're seeing here is that the people who have voted in the past and have ridden Nemesis already have now decided that maybe other new rides like a Helix, like a Tyrone, are better rides than Nemesis, and we see it dropping in the rankings, just like you would see any ride on your list drop in the rankings when new stuff like Fury or
Sure.
I can't even think of another ride.
well, no, and that's a very good point. So that's a very good point. So we will see just where Nemesis comes in, but it will not be higher than Iron Rattler this year.
Yeah.
Moving on, X2 versus Intimidator, 305, and again, a ride that has, up until last year, had never not been in the championship, to my knowledge. Intimidator 305 for the first time was not in the top 2 last year. Going up against X2, which has always been very, very strong, has always been a borderline top 10 ride. Any chance for the upset from X2?
Well, you never know with X2, Danny Miller, because last year, if we talk a lot about Danny Miller screwing Raptor.
Oh yeah.
But indeed, Danny Miller screwed X2 last year. Because if you didn't notice, X2 was supposed to move over Intimidator 232 out of Carowinds.
Yes, it was.
For some reason, I-232 moved on to the next round last year, which was the great mistake of the brackets. We don't know how it happened. You might have watched our faces on the reveal show where we both realized that this.
We realized that at the exact same time when we were going through the rankings, and that was the bonus question here. Now that people have submitted their stuff, but yes, when we were going through the results last year, I fat fingered an Intimidator in there, and I don't know. I honestly don't have a good explanation for
you don't like California. The California people
yes, that's
have
exactly
known
why.
for a while, Danny Miller, that you don't like California. Now we have definitive proof that Danny Miller doesn't like California. Well, let me say this, California people. I love California. I love Ghost Rider. I love X2.
I love X2. I'd prefer X2 over Intimidator from Carowinds. Don't get me wrong.
But let me say this. I think I-305 is still going to win this matchup. So.
Yeah, that being said, now if we were to do this properly, we would make X2 win, even though it ranked lower. If there were to be, justification here, but no, it is Intimidator 305 moving on to the Sweet 16, and we will have I-305 take on Iron Rattler in the Sweet 16. That right there is. We talked about some of these other matchups. That right there, it's not getting any easier, folks.
No, it is not. This is quite the region.
All right. Like I said before, Goliath at La Ronde. Thanks for playing. You made it to the thrilling 32. Goliath from La Ronde actually was number 32 on the steel list, so it was not going to move on no matter who it played. Superman the Ride from Six Flags New England moving on to the Sweet 16. I don't think it's a big surprise there. Top 10
It's not,
coaster.
but if ever there was a coaster that should lose to Goliath at La Ronde, it is Superman.
Well, and I don't know how Goliath from La Ronde even got into this thrilling 32. That for me might be regardless of what happens from here on out, Goliath from La Ronde making the thrilling 32 this year, to me, might be the biggest surprise of this entire thing.
I see. I don't know, because I really like Goliath at La Ronde. I have it ranked in my top probably 30 or so. So not super high, but it's not super low either. Like I like Goliath at La Ronde better than a lot of rides. Especially I even like it better than Superman the Ride. So if I was to pick my own personal rankings, I would have Goliath at La Ronde moving on here actually. But I didn't get the sense that other people...
The good of the many outweighs the good of the few.
Well, and I don't get the sense that a lot of people like Goliath at La Ronde, so I'm a little surprised as you are to see it here, but, one coaster that I like, so...
Well, there you go. And to complete the region of death, we've got the matchup to end all matchups. I think we might have to stop doing COASTER.net Uncut after we reveal who the winner of this is. It's the battle for Cedar Point, Maverick versus Millennium Force. Last year, Maverick number 4, Millennium Force number 5, just fractions of a percentage point behind Maverick. Maverick versus Millennium Force. Millennium Force versus Maverick. Maverick, Millie. Maverick, Millie. Andy, who's moving on?
Oh, man, you're going to piss off half the audience here. No
Yeah, we're going to piss off half the audience either way.
So, me, I'm a Maverick fan. I've always been a Maverick fan. I have Maverick as, my number 2 ranked coaster right behind Raptor. So to me, Maverick is great. Millennium's probably my number 5 ranked coaster, so Millennium's right there too. I don't understand the people that like Millennium over Maverick. I think Maverick is one of those perfect rides, and if you get one of the outstanding night rides in that perfect scenario, like I did a few times, it's a perfect ride from start to finish. Millennium Force, nice ride, a calming ride, relaxing ride, beautiful first drop, long drawn-out turns, some nice little airtime hills in the middle, a great airtime hill past the station. Man, I'll tell you what. Let's go to the posters that somebody are going to win. I don't know, Danny, but we do have the lovely Maverick poster here.
The Heartline.
The Heartline that are still on.
Hey, where did you get that picture?
Oh man, that's a beautiful picture, isn't it? Yeah, it was there when the park was open there, guys. So, and then the lovely blue 2000 right there with that wonderful.
I gotta say that is an awesome picture. The way that turned out with the blue and the red, I think that is completely.
It's beautiful. Awesome. And we've sold quite a few of these already. There are a few left. These actual posters will be going to the winners. The ones I'm handling here. I will autograph the back too for you if you really want me to.
No, I don't know why they would want that.
Well, I don't know. Well, it's be better than your autograph. Anyway,
Andy, you haven't answered the question. Who's moving on?
Maverick is moving on, Danny.
Oh, Maverick is moving on, says Andy Rabarchek. Well, the winner, moving on to the Sweet 16, begins with an M.
Whoa.
It's at Cedar Point.
Whoa. Is it made by Intamin?
It's made by Intamin.
Holy hell.
Oh, man. I'm trying to think of another comparison. It's got some overbank turns. It's got to drop steeper than 70 degrees.
Holy.
Well,
it's in Frontier Town, though. I don't know if they still count that as Frontier.
I don't. Are y'all ready for some serious sidewinding? Maverick is moving on. Maverick once again ranks higher than Millennium Force for the second consecutive year. Maverick from Cedar Point takes down Millennium Force. Maverick moving, and that's just to go to the Sweet 16. That's just to get out of the first round. I mean,
we got some people.
We could potentially have 2 of these rides again being in the top 5 again. Top 5, top 6, top 7 or 8, and one of them has to go. It is Maverick moving on, and it will take on Superman the Ride.
You smell that, Danny? That's the smell of fire and brackets.
Oh, they're coming for us.
Yeah, the pitchforks are out. And they're lighting their torches with their broken brackets.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a matchup. And I can't wait to see where those 2 rides ended up ranking at the end, because surely they are very, very close. And again, number 4 and number 5 last year, we could not have asked for a better time to have that matchup. We almost got it last year in the Final Four. Yeah. Millennium Force ducked out to Expedition G-Force, I believe, in the Elite Eight. Otherwise, we would have gotten it in the Final Four. We got it in the very first round this year. Boy, the coaster gods like us in that region, because so much to talk about. Still so many compelling storylines. Iron Rattler, Intimidator 305, Superman the Ride, and Maverick. We've got four coasters that have all been to the Final Four at least once, and we've got 2 former champions all in this one region, in the Stengel region here, in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, that's just insanity.
Unbelievable. All right, I don't know how we can follow it up, but we're going to try to with the last region here for the night is the Schwarzkopf region. We've got New Texas Giant from Six Flags Over Texas going up against Blue Fire Mega Coaster from Europa Park in Germany. Andy, you're not a New Texas Giant fan. I love New Texas Giant. Neither of us have ridden Blue Fire. Blue Fire has done fairly well over the years here, has made the bracket the last several years. Your thoughts?
This one's a tough one to me because, Blue Fire, hasn't done well.
This is one of the ones that was almost. There were some picks in this first round that were split almost 50-50. This is one that was pretty much split almost 50-50 between the 100 plus brackets we got. This is one that was split right down the middle. We had half and half here, really.
I just by looking at it, Blue Fire looks like a much better coaster than New Texas Giant. So I'm going to have to go with Blue Fire here, and given our new overseas, love here that we've seen throughout this bracket, I think Blue Fire.
Well, it is New Texas Giant moving on from Six Flags Over Texas. The RMC love hanging strong here, knocking off Blue Fire is New Texas Giant going on to the Sweet 16 once again.
Not that it matters at all.
Well, not that it matters because, again, just like LaRon from LaRon's Goliath, Montu, thanks for playing, going up against Fury 325 from Carowinds. And again, Montu I think is a great ride. It's still one of the better B&M inverts. Kind of from the classic B&M, their heyday, the mid '90s. When they were making some of really their stronger intensity rides. Rides like Kumba and Raptor and Nemesis and Montu in 1996. Some of their really intense rides before they kind of went into a bit of a lull there in the early 2000s. But I don't think Montu has the legs to knock off Fury.
No, I like the navy blue invert, but I don't think it can beat, I don't think he can beat Fury 325.
No, Fury 325 moving on to the Sweet 16, looking to exact revenge this year after being shockingly beaten the championship last year. Fury 325, the runner-up last year, the champion from 2 years ago. So Fury on its way to trying to get back to the championship. All right, last two matchups here. And we've got two Kings Islands coasters yet here to talk about. We've got Banshee from Kings Island going up against Twisted Colossus from Six Flags Magic Mountain. And this is a tough one because Twisted Colossus started off very strong in its first year, dipped off a little bit last year, but Banshee has also dipped off a little bit. So who's going to prevail, you think, between these two?
Well, just looking at all four of these coasters in this, I don't think there's a whole lot of faith here, to go up against what I would assume would be Fury winning the whole thing here. But still, points can be had, and these are two very, very difficult decisions here with Banshee and Twisted Colossus. Man, I'll tell you what, these two are really close. I personally have Banshee higher. Twisted Colossus.
I have Banshee higher as well.
I'm going to have to go with Banshee and the Ohio people here.
Yeah, I have Banshee higher on my personal list as well. But you know what? The Californians felt like they got screwed lots of times in the past. Twisted Colossus is moving on to the Sweet 16. So congratulations there. Can't say that I screwed Twisted Colossus this year anyways. So Twisted Colossus moving on to the Sweet 16. All right, we've got 31 of our 32 coasters that have advanced out of the two brackets. We've got all 16 of the wood coasters. We've got 15 of our 16 steel coasters advancing. We've got one spot left in the Sweet 16, and it will go to the winner between Cannibal from Lagoon in Farmington, Utah, and Diamondback from Kings Island, Mason, Ohio. Cannibal, a new ride to the Thrilling 32, one that a lot of people have not ridden, sort of a Eurofighter Infinity style ride, not built by Gerschlauer, but, fairly well themed. Diamondback, really one of the, in my opinion, one of the best B&M hyper coasters out there. The question is, does the uniqueness of Cannibal have enough to take down what is sort of not really a copycat ride, but something that we're used to seeing a lot of, but does it extremely well, and an extremely good ride, and a ride that is, very historically very kind of cemented its spot in the bracket over the years here in Diamondback.
I like Cannibal. I think it does a lot of cool stuff. But to put it up against Diamondback, I think Diamondback is one of those favorite rides here that everyone seems to enjoy. Oh man, I just, how does it overcome Cannibal? Or excuse me, how does Cannibal overcome Diamondback? It's just like, and Diamondback, possibly, a Diamondback Fury 325 matchup down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that. I mean, Twisted Colossus is sort of an unknown, maybe. I mean, Cannibal to me. I think when the bracket came out, we looked at the Wild Mouse and said, that's kind of a ride you're just happy to get into the thrilling 32.
Cannibal happy to be here, right?
Yeah, and I think it was sort of the Goliath from Laurent. I think it was sort of the same way. It's like, okay, I got in, but I'm not really going to contend. I think you kind of get the impression that Cannibal is kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, we got into the bracket, but we're not really going anywhere. I think is kind of the impression you get here.
Yeah.
What? Andy, Cannibal from Lagoon is going to the Sweet 16. Cannibal knocks off Diamondback. Can you believe it?
Kings Island.
I am not joking. Both Diamondback and
numbers.
Yes, I checked the numbers. I ran them again. I did not screw the Kings Island fanboys. Cannibal from Lagoon in Farmington, Utah, has knocked off Diamondback from Kings Island. And in the last matchup of the evening, Andy, I think this is the biggest upset of the night.
This is the shocker of the evening. The Cinderella. Cannibal, who when I was, before we even started this, I didn't even write down, I wrote down rides that I thought would make it in. I didn't even think Cannibal was going to make it into the 32, but now to learn that it's knocked off Diamondback in the 32, that's a pretty big deal. So now the hopes and dreams of all the KI fanboys rest solely on the shoulders of one Mystic Timbers. A good ride to rest your dreams on, but Banshee and Diamondback, the two huge Kings Island, B&Ms there, out in the first round. That, my friend, to West Coast coasters, is probably the story of the evening.
And, I mean, it's one thing to lose to Twisted Colossus, but, I mean, Cannibal knocking off Diamondback, all of a sudden, if you're sitting in your chair there and you had Diamondback going, a couple rounds deep here, and even, honestly, if you had Twisted Colossus going pretty deep here, now that Diamondback has been beaten by Cannibal, are you shaking in your boots just a little bit, knowing that a ride like Cannibal has all of a sudden taken down a longtime favorite? Could Cannibal kind of be the Cinderella this year to make a deep run? I mean, you've got Fury on the other side here, but what do you think about the odds of Cannibal taking down Twisted Colossus?
Oh, two unknowns here. Man, this is that's a tough one. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
We might have to discuss that one, next week when we do the next round. That might be have to be the one that we discuss a little bit. Get to the results. So there you have it. We talked about Cannibal. Any other big surprises in the Steel? I mean, we had a lot of overseas rides and non-U.S. rides moving on. We have a lot of U.S. rides on the right side of the bracket here, the last two regions. But the first two regions on the Steel, we had 6 of the 8 being from outside the United States. So the bracket is kind of in two halves right now. You've got the non-U.S. side and you've got the U.S. side. So we've got some regionalities, I think, if that's a word, going on here. We certainly have a lot of our European folks rooting for the rides on the left side of the bracket, and then your U.S. folks rooting for the perennial favorites on the right side from the States. So, Andy, last order of business tonight. Let's take a look at the stand in the challenge after the first round. We'll throw up the top, 20, 25 or so here. We have a standalone leader, one Ted Adams, with 28 correct picks overall, all 16 correct in the wood bracket in the first round. That is a feat. That is a feat to be proud of, my friend. And 12 of the 16 correct on the Steel side. And then in second place, we have Jeremy Ousley. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. All 16 right in the wood as well, and 11 of 16 correct in the Steel, so he's got 29 points. Both of those folks getting the 2 bonus points for having all the picks correct in a particular round. And then if we go down, Jarek, who's sitting in 11th place there, also had all 16 correct on the wood side, but only 9 right in the steel side. So, 27 points with 25 correct picks there. A couple other folks sitting in the top 10 here. We've got our friend Adam the Beard Man sitting in a tie for 3rd. He had 15 of 16 correct in the wood and 13 correct in the steel. The most that we had correct in the steel, we had 15 out of 16 correct in the steel, which was Renee, who's sitting there in 8th place. Look at this, Roller Coaster. Big time activity there on the YouTube channel. In the comments, Roller Coaster always active there on the YouTube, sitting at 28 points. We also have our friend Maverick Rob Dole sitting there in a tie, at 27 points. He's got 15 of 16 in the wood correct and 12 out of 16 in the steel. For 27 points there. So lots of folks that we are used to mentioning on the show here in the top 20 or so after round 1.
This was a tough round, and an applause to those people who did well in it, because there were quite a few question marks there to who would move on to the next one. So congrats to all those at the top spots, and it'll be interesting to see who ultimately will take the total crown here and become the Thrilling 32 bracket champion.
Yeah, and as you can see, most people still sitting with both their wood and steel champions is still in contention. We had one person with Wildfire sitting in 5th place there, Julian picking Wildfire as the wood champion, so knocked out there. So that may come back to bite Julian there later on. For the most part, everyone, kind of still with everybody. Everybody's got their horses in the race still, for the most part here. We'll just rattle through the top 11 here because we had a tie. Tied at 27, we have Jarek, Gooch, Ethan Berger, Ian, Renee, Maverick, Rob, and Mackenzie. In a 3-way tie with 28 points, we've got Julian, Roller Coaster, and Adam Beard. And then in 2nd place is Jeremy with 29. And then again, Ted Adams is our leader in the clubhouse with 30 points after round 1. So again, a lot of things can change over the course of these last 4 rounds, but certainly doing well in this first round and still, having a lot of those rides in contention certainly will get you off to a good start and will put yourself in good position to win this contest. So Andy, any final thoughts?
Well, if you feel that this first round has not been in your favor and you were really interested in those posters that we were talking about, they are available on COASTER-net.com. You can go and get those beautiful posters. There's a Dark Vengeance right there. And you saw the previous 2 earlier in the show. I love them. The winners will get those.
Oh, they're fantastic.
So if you still want them, they will be on sale up until I believe March 12th or something like that. So you only have like a month left to purchase those posters, in our store, and they will go away forever after that to replace by different ones.
Yeah, the idea here, like we said when you revealed the posters, you talked about how we will do these for a couple months at a time, and the prize for winning the bracket challenge here will be a set of those 3, and if you have already purchased them by the time that comes around, you can get some custom ones, one of a kind, as it were, and there's not to foreshadow a little bit here, but it is not a coincidence that the new set will be coming out shortly after the Thrilling 32 bracket challenge wraps up. A little bit of a tease there, maybe. If you want them and you don't like how the first round went, maybe get yours before the chance is gone. And worst case scenario, if you end up coming back and winning the contest, you get 3 one-of-a-kind prints for yourself that no one else will ever get to have. So that would be pretty cool. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for the first round of the 2018 Thrilling 32. Next week, we will be joining you for the Sweet 16, and we will once again cut the field in half. We will get it from 16 down to 8 in both the wood and the steel brackets, and we will start to separate the men from the boys. The first round is where some of these upsets take place, but the Sweet 16, when we get it down to the Elite 8, is really where we start to see the big-time heavy hitters come into play here.
Absolutely. So, as always, thank you for joining us here on the Thrilling 32. I'm, of course, Andy Robarchek from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
And as always, ride on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time, guys.